Hello everyone, we are in Mesa Verde National Park in Colorado, in the very southwestern corner of Colorado. This place is very important and special because we're gonna see some cliff-side dwellings of the ancient Pueblo natives that lived here between, I could be wrong, about 500 to 1200 AD.
Yeah.
They lived here for hundreds of years,
Yeah.
in these very nice sort of dwellings and cities built into the mountains. Is almost kind of like it reminds me of a southwestern USA version of like Machu Picchu, where these houses and kind of apartment buildings almost were built into the mountains. And these people lived here for hundreds of years, and then eventually sort of spread out. Different tribes from the Four Corners region, which we just came back from there actually, the Four Corners Monument, where different tribes sort of lived in this region, and the Pueblos specifically lived in these cliffside dwellings until it's sort of disputed why they left the area.
Yeah.
Some say climate change. You know, there were pretty bad droughts in the early 1300s, which then kind of forced them to flee and then head further down into like New Mexico and like Taos, and deeper into Arizona, Colorado. They sort of spread out.
Yeah.
So
yeah, because they're like major crops like the corn and the beans were obviously not growing as much because of drought. That's one hypothesis. That the major drought led people to leave, and also that the game, so like the elk, bison and whatnot, also moved into other states due to the droughts as well. So they believe those could be reasons as to why they left. Like they couldn't grow stuff, and then the animals moved.
And there is also evidence of like intertribal warfare, like civil war.
That's like a third reason.
There's many reasons why they abandoned the area, and then it was discovered later in the, I believe, early 1800s, if not mid 1800s, by some settlers out here who found this abandoned place, and they found all these dwellings and artifacts, and even bones of the people who used to live here. And people started taking them by the truckload. Apparently they started taking all the artifacts. So Theodore Roosevelt, the hero, the legend, turned this into a national park to sort of preserve and protect this area, to stop the people from further vandalizing and taking all the precious archaeological stuff from this region. So we're gonna, I believe as of recording this, it's not fully open. Like not all of these sites are fully open, so we won't be able to get as close as we wish we could have. But we're gonna drive now further into the park and hopefully see as close as we can some of these dwellings. So come along. Whoa, you got a whole view over here. Yep, so 45 minutes up some steep, windy mountain paths, and you get this beautiful view. Navajo Canyon. Check it out. down there is like a 3-story tower. Yeah, so that tower that you saw, yeah, was built right there, and they used to actually scale those rock walls with ladders and ropes to actually access that area. So this was the site of 2 pit houses. One was then built sort of next to the other, and sort of above this hole, or above this pit, there would be sort of a scaffolding of wood and other sort of coverings. They would cover the wood with clay, you know, repairing it after each season with the rain and the winters and stuff like that. So yeah, this used to be about in 675, the year 675, there would be basically 2 families living here. That over there is sort of like a little fireplace where they would have a fire, and then it would sort of, the smoke would rise up from this chimney type thing over here. And yeah, you would have a few smaller rooms and pits where you would have different fire pots and stuff cooking. So yeah, this was an actual site of a Puebloan native family over 1400 years ago. So over time, the architecture of the Pueblo natives changed. They sort of went from being semi-nomadic to using pit houses, then single-story villages, above the ground buildings, multi-story, cliff dwellings like the one we saw, to then eventually migrating away from this area. And in this exhibit, we sort of see the transition of the styles. So this is a later style that's not too deep in the ground, and they actually used to have walls on the edges there. So sort of like this. And you can still see the stones they would use to hold up the walls there. More traditional style would be sort of like this one, where they actually found tons of stone tools. They would use stone to chip away at the rocks and clay to shape these things. This is a traditional style. I would say a good 6 feet underground. You know, has your typical fire pit with the chimney, sort of seating area down there. And then, you know, then they would adapt to use walls rather than just hatched rooftops with like wood on the top. So here they would have sort of a structure above the ground. And then this would be a third example of a much deeper, probably the deepest type they would have, and these would be for special occasions. According to this, they would sort of meditate and have spiritual and religious events here, with sort of a wood roof over their heads, with a fire pit, chimney that rises out through there. So 3 different styles. Yep. So here there used to be a tower, and the towers were used for, you know, defense, to sort of scout out the surroundings, for astronomy, and for many other reasons, to seek refuge in bad weather. They built hundreds of these towers all around here in the valleys. Here's a pretty deep. They used to call these homes kivas. In Spanish, it almost sounds like the word cueva, which means sort of cave. Over time, they adapted the use of bricks. So these villages here are sort of in the later periods, and here you sort of see when they began experimenting with bricklaying and also tower making. And here you have probably the most iconic one from the national park. Deep over there is a pretty big village. Let's get closer. That's the Cliff Palace. There's many dwellings here. There's one over there.
Yeah, I mean, this is Fargate.
There's like small.
There's smaller ones down the canyon. There's Cliff Palace, the main one. There's another over here as well. It's at least 5 or 6. So yeah, there you have it. I hope the clips of the Cliff Palace came out nice. It's hard to, given the equipment we have, it was hard to sort of do it, and plus the time of day, the sun is hitting it at an angle where it's kind of in the shadow. But wow, what a breathtaking place. The sheer audacity they had living in these very steep mountainous terrain is very respectable, very bold of them to sort of live in these dwellings. But yeah, it's so amazing. It's very cool, this park, because you learn sort of the progression of the Puebloan people's architecture and style of building their villages and homes, the reasons and why they sort of adapted the buildings as such over time. You saw the innovations they sort of did to the place, and they sort of crowned it off with those beautiful cliffside dwellings and stuff that you saw there. Very, very interesting national park. The first national park to preserve both a natural area but also an area where human-made buildings were being preserved. So this is the first national park that preserves both natural and human-made wonders, because you have national parks like the St. Louis Archway, which is a man-made thing, but that's a natural park because it's you know, a modern engineering marvel, I guess, if you will. But yeah, this place, very beautiful, very timeless place. Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I thought it was great. You get to see like the different generational like innovations that each of the like dwellings that are preserved have, and you get to see just like the differences of how they came out. And it's just really cool to think about like the homes that we have today versus where we started as humans, and what people thought of gathering, and how people even thought of engineering their homes and how it would protect them against the natural elements. So it's really cool seeing where we started from as a species and then where we are today. So it's really cool, I think, when I see like families with their kids come here and show them these dwellings, because it really speaks volumes as to how just like engineering, how far we've gotten with engineering and construction, and like just like being humble and grateful for what we have now.
Yeah, and I think one really interesting contrast is that the Pueblo culture, you know, the concept of an individual wasn't very strong. They really believed in the community first and foremost, and that shows in how they build their villages. Every home was kind of circular in nature, because you would have the families gather around in a circle and share in the fire. If you had maybe a wedding or the joining of two families, you would literally have two circles merged together and with sort of a connecting room. or the two houses would be connected through a doorway, so that both families would have their side, but they can sort of intermingle and connect. And then multiply that on a bigger scale, you have villages with interconnected houses, towers sort of in the middle with all the buildings connected around to that, and all the buildings connected to sort of a town plaza. So all the people that lived in the villages were all connected, and their houses reflected as such. Very different to today, where, you know, like back in New York City where we grew up, it was everyone had their own little box, and you can really go years without really speaking or even seeing your neighbor. Whereas out here in the Pueblo village, that would be impossible. So very interesting to see how people lived, and how our dwellings affects our whole culture and society. Right?
And the prioritization of like the individual versus the community, like you said, how that's changed over time.
Yeah. So definitely come out to Green Mesa Verde. Sorry, Mesa Verde. Come out to Mesa Verde. Very beautiful place.
Yeah.
And you're right at the intersection of 4 fantastic, beautiful states.
Yeah.
So after this, we're heading down to Arizona. We're gonna be checking out the Grand Canyon. That's a must see.
Yeah.
So we'll see you there. Adios.
See ya.